Awesome.
There we go. Yeah, let's go.
And we are live. There's my kiddos. Taking them for a walk with my brother while my wife's at the gym. But anyway, so I was just telling Jason about how when I was living in Providence and Fitchburg, I ended up, Providence, Rhode Island, Fitchburg, Mass. I ended up noticing that different regions are geographically isolated from other regions, largely for the purpose of not forcing the rich people to interact with the poor people. And there's a lot of sound reasons for doing this, but it really is interesting when you notice. Okay, so right now we're on a walk through my hometown. Not gonna tell you guys where it is necessarily because it's not that easy to find me. But basically, walking through my hometown, and the roads are such that you can't actually get throughout the town by walking. You need a car. The roads are really dangerous to walk on. They have embankments on either side, so you don't really have anywhere to jump to. They have sharp turns. There's really nowhere to walk. It's just not very safe. The speed limit's too high. Like, I went for a walk down one of the roads my first few days here, and I was bringing my trusty hiking stick, just going for a walk, and a cop came by, and I was like, "Oh, hey, officer, thanks for picking me up, because do you mind giving me a ride, because this road's really dangerous. I just noticed that I just moved the area." And he's like, "Oh, just moved the area. What do you move here for?" I'm like, "Oh, I just wanted a nice place to bring my wife and kids, raise my kids in a good area." "Oh, that's nice. So what do you do for work?" "Oh, I got a supplement company." "Oh, you got a supplement company? You got a business card?" "Yeah, I got a business card. Give my business card." "Oh, it's so great to have you here." And it's just like, you can't get anywhere in this town without a car, because they don't want anyone in this town who doesn't have a car. They don't want people coming to this town and getting, I don't know, they don't want people who aren't already rich coming here. So they just orchestrate the entire town such that you cannot get anywhere without a car, and a car is basically a hallmark of a certain level of income. People who are at the poverty line cannot really maintain their cars, maintain inspection, all this stuff, so they can't drive on the roads, they can't walk here, they can't get around, and people end up stuck in these little created 5-minute cities, basically unable to leave.
If you think about it, New York, Boston, they all have city planners, like literally offices meant to plan out the city.
Oh, Boston, that's another great example. So Boston, everyone complains about the T system in Boston, how it's actually if you try to take the T from one section of Boston, even if it's right next to another section, you won't be able to, and how that's a sign of Boston's poor city planning. It's not. It's actually a sign of their great city planning. They've made it deliberately so that you can live within a few miles of some rich people, but it'll take you hours to go actually see them, so you'll never do it. So you'll just be isolated to your poor area, and you'll only interact with the poor people, so the rich people won't have to. They don't have to bother themselves the silly questions like, is the person I'm interacting with of my socioeconomic status, or are they one of those poor people that I need to not engage with in order to keep my nepotism going? Nepotism, again, not being a bad thing, but just being simply the way that everything runs ever. And the only exception to nepotism is on the frontier of any field area. Even fields is still nepotism. You watch Oppenheimer and stuff, you see how favoritism, how politics, how being on the in-group versus not the in-group basically determines the entire structure of the project. And again, I'm just sharing these thoughts as someone who wants to make sure that I benefit from this, because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to usurp this giant system, because it's just too much momentum, it's too much energy. I tried health coaching, I tried actually getting people who were dying to fix their habits and not die, and I succeeded to a small degree, but the number of people who were dying who were unwilling to stop drinking Coca-Cola, or even start cooking their own food, or even eat raw liver, or go drink raw milk, or any basic thing, was so high that I'm like, there's no possible way that I'm going to change this giant system within my lifetime. I don't know if it'd even be desirable to do that, because it created all this instability. Maybe this whole period of having to sort out who's in charge of what again. It's really crazy. But anyway, so we're coming up to the road, and right here you can see, so we're gonna cross
is it very left and
this way, and then we go up. But I mean, you see, again, we're gonna have to walk down this road briefly, and this is the safest part of the road. And it's still not even like made. I know, we're getting out of the way. So this isn't even like, you can see like you can't really get places. You can't really get places on this road by walking because there's no sidewalks. There's no, it's not meant for people to walk on. This road, yes, Katerina, I'm coming. This road is meant for people to drive their cars down, and they don't want people who want to use the sidewalks in this town because that's just sort of how nepotism goes. Like, and again, I get it though, because it's difficult. It's difficult to make sure everyone's on the same page. Because even like people have said stuff like, why does the third world remain the third world? Well, the third world remains the third world because the third world is full of a bunch of people who, if they see a house like this, they're gonna go strip it for copper. And it's the same thing. Like, you need a base level of like, okay, like let's put it this way, like if my entire family is starving to death and I don't even have a social security number, and I was raised by people who were raised under the same conditions, I don't really understand what it's like to live in a house like this, I'm probably just gonna go like steal a bunch of stuff and try to sell it to get food, if that was the way I was raised. And that's the problem with a lot of like living in Haverhill, living in Fitchburg, living in Providence. See, it's the night of the living dead. The crack addicts walking around like lurching, and like you don't want to raise your kids there. Here, walk around with a stick because wild dogs and stuff, you never know. So now we're coming up to another neighborhood we can walk around, but even just walking briefly over to another neighborhood, very difficult. So in Providence and Fitchburg, what I experienced was the same thing, except the areas that were accessible by foot were exclusively occupied by like Night of the Living Dead style crack addicts. And what that did...
Well, also, why do you think a lot of the Europeans came over here? It's because the style of nepotism solidified within Europe for thousands of years. And if you want a new start, you had to go to the pioneer land. You had to go to the forefront of where stuff was happening.
Yeah, that's why my ancestors are here.
Like, to make the American dream is literally like the Americas weren't discovered yet, so you could come here and not be held down by
your birth. Basically, it's like, oh well, you weren't like the son of the right nobility, so you don't get to do this. And that's literally like nepotism is simply, I think it's even funny we have a word for it, but nepotism, because it's just kind of the way things are.
Also, the longer the society goes, like even the US, the longer it happens, like the more you're gonna see nepotism solidifying. I mean, it's always there, even in the Indian societies that were there before us. Like, the tribal daughter would marry the other tribal people.
Well, like, at the end of the day, so this is actually, I'll describe this. This is actually when Nietzsche's made observations in Beyond Good and Evil, which is very fascinating. But it just comes down so simply. So I'm raising these beautiful girls. They're wonderful. They're absolutely amazing. And I'm putting a lot of effort into raising them. Like, they're smart, they're assertive, they're intelligent, they're articulate, they're like well-behaved, they're socialized. Put a lot of energy into raising these girls, you know? Now, I want them to marry someone who is of comparable value. And now, the way that generally happens to work in our society is that value doesn't just happen, you know what I mean? Like, you don't just leave a baby alone in the woods and come back 20 years later and have a well-adjusted, articulate person. You probably don't even, you probably have a dead baby skeleton that's probably all smashed up, you know? So, great things are not accidental. You want to carry this? I'll pull the thing. Okay. So, great things are not accidental. They take a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and a lot of deliberate suffering, and a lot of systems that even allow the suffering to work, because you could just suffer and not get anywhere. So I'm not gonna want my daughters marrying someone's kid who's just like all confused and stuff and all like, I don't know what's going on, I'm an angry blah 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 blah, and I gotta go to jail, and I gotta like scream at people, and I gotta, you know what I mean, like I gotta like freaking, like, you know what I mean, like, or like I'm not gonna do anything, like, I want them to marry somewhat equivalent. So how am I gonna know, you know? Let's say they're 16 or so, and I'm recognizing that they're gonna date and become attracted to the young men in the area that they're in. So what I do is just move into an area, get to know the people in the area, and make sure the people in the area are people like me. Because I'm like, well, people like me, as close as they can be, because there are no men like me, there's only me. But people like me, as close as they can be, are going to raise daughters like and sons like I'm raising. So then they're probably, you know what I mean? You can see it's like my jiu-jitsu gym. A lot of the kids there, my kids got like probably wife and kids like jiu-jitsu last Saturday, and they're playing around with the other jiu-jitsu parents' kids. Very similar lifestyle, similar beliefs, similar values. And that's sort of just how things go. Similar lifestyle, similar beliefs, similar values. Now, the geography is important because I didn't think the geography was important. I thought what was important was similar lifestyle, similar beliefs, similar values. And then I moved to Fitchburg, moved to Providence, trying to get things going there. And what I realized is it's all geographic. Like, the people with the similar lifestyles and beliefs to me aren't in Fitchburg, they are in Providence. They're in New Hampshire, they're in much nicer areas. So I figured out a way to get myself into the nicer area and then into an even nicer area, just so I can go for walks with my kids. You know, not even like crazy nepotism type stuff, but just like I want to be able to go for walks with my kids without being bothered by crack addicts. And that, it turns out, you need to be, or homeless people, it turns out you need to be a part of it.
Also probably crack addicts, but
yes, yeah.
one's in Haverhill.
It's a lot of overlap. Met a lot of homeless people who don't seem to be crack addicts, but they seem to be those confused sort that I don't want my daughter going with. So, and it's just I don't want my daughter going with them because like they're all confused. They got health issues and stuff. Like I've worked to get my health so good. I don't want like, you see how it gets messed up, you know? So anyway, walking through this nice area, just going for a walk. You wouldn't think it, but going for a walk costs a lot of money. And then you start thinking about it a little deeper and you start thinking about how like nobility has never really gone away. I mean, really, it's like people start businesses with their friends and they're friends of the people they do the sports with, but adults who do sports are really all rich people, because if you're doing, like if you have enough free time after keeping yourself alive to do a sport, you've got some systems in place. You've got family, you've got a community, you've got a skill, a trade, you've got serious wealth. I mean, we got to understand, like, wealth is not simply the amount of money you have on paper. Look at this beautiful, incredibly expensive house. Wealth is not something the amount of money you have on paper. It's family, it is health, it is connections, it is community, like being a part of a good community, like actual community that acts like community. Having skills, having understanding of how the world works. Reading books is one of the best things I've done for my net worth, and just keep reading books because you'll just notice all these things that are in the books that if you didn't notice those, you wouldn't be able to put stuff together to make your life easier. But even books, oh, here's a fun fact. The area I live in, you can't see them right here because it's not specifically in this neighborhood, but they have little free libraries everywhere because it's so wealthy that they just put books out for free for people, and you could just get them for free. Like I tell my friends this, they're like, oh, I should start a business selling books. So one of them had some experience selling books. So I was like, dude, you're in the best area to do that. Like, you know, like other parts of the country aren't like this. Like, you can't just drive around and get free books for nothing. And again, to those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, even the little they have will be taken from them. And it starts with sidewalks. It starts with where you can walk to, where you can transport yourself to. I mean, even all of us middle class people or whatever, with our cars. I mean, the real rich people just travel by plane. They travel by plane between places. I've noticed traveling by plane, the amount of wealth that I'd be able to accumulate simply by noticing discrepancies in market by geography and then creating businesses that capitalize on those. I mean, you go back to medieval Europe and the peasantry, the serfs, were defined by not being allowed to leave their nobles' land. It kind of sounds like those 15-minute cities or towns with no sidewalks and people with no cars. It's very interesting how you can control people in all these ways in a free market economy. This is why I consider business to be abstract warfare. Again, I'm not really saying any of this as like an issue. I just don't actually expect anyone to watch these YouTube videos, and the people who do, I think, will be intelligent enough to get this and make use of it. Again, not as like, oh my God, we need to overthrow the system. Like, the system's pretty good, all things considered.
Better than Europe's, man.
Better than Europe's, a lot better than Europe's. Europe has basically decided to...
They have no dream of upward mobility. They basically are like, I'm gonna work my job, and then with the free time I get, I'm gonna take my 5 weeks of vacation every year and not invest that into starting a company or starting anything myself. Whatever class I'm born into is what I'm gonna die into.
They have nice backpacks.
Yeah.
They make nice luxury goods because they seem to focus a lot on luxury. But yeah, it's
a lot of it's small towns, and when you think about it, it's like, it was talked about by George Mack on the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he was saying how you think the UK is wealthy. It's really not. The UK is incredibly poor, but London is absurdly wealthy. Like,
geography.
I think the UK is like number 6 for GDP, and it's like no, London's number 6 for GDP, and it's attached to an absurdly poor country that like the countryside is dying and everything. And these small towns are like, everyone's leaving for the city because
I'm gonna come in and buy them up. I'm just gonna come. I'm probably not in England because of the land laws and stuff, unless I get like my land owned by like a Singaporean bank, who's then like in the name of a Cook Islands trust, managed by like some Swiss lawyer or something. But yeah, come and buy up all the land. That's just what I want to do. Again, not because it's bad, not because this whole thing. I mean, it is kind of bad for the people who are getting crushed under the system, but it's better than the rape of Nanking in China. You know, it's better than what the Japanese did to Nanking.
A lot better than communism and having the government tell you what you can and can't eat and then starving to death.
It's better than when the East India Trading Company, yeah, turn around up there. The East India Trading Company bought all of Ireland and then told all the Irish people they were only allowed to eat potatoes. Yeah, so, I mean, actually not really, because now they're just starving everyone to death by only feeding them poison food that gives people in the US cancer at the highest rate ever. Gen Z millennials have like the highest rates of cancer. Europe, they're at least not poisoning people as actively, but the mental control is probably a lot higher. Again, to get out of the mental control, you just have to read books, because I think all the people who are trying to control you mentally don't actually read. Like, really, I mean, Terrence McKenna said this, like, the people in power must not read books, or books would be illegal. Like, the stuff I've read in books, I literally look at, I'm like,
how to start a cult.
You know, like it's so detailed, like how to get away with murder. And I'm just reading this, and I'm like,
The Godfather. How to start a mob. Like,
how to actually get away with murder. Like, and I'm reading it, I'm like, how is this legal? Like, how is this, like, I could just read this book? Like, dude, don't people understand what's in this?
A guide to homemade explosives?
The anarchist cookbook, like, really, like, like, it's pretty crazy. So, read books.
Buy it on Amazon.
I also think books are basically, like, you think about who becomes authors. I think a lot of the people who become authors are basically the children of the elite, who, being intelligent and seeing how things are,
also having the time.
Yeah, they just have the time. They're sort of like, I kind of know how the world works, and I got a lot of free time. I'm gonna write about it. That's a lot of books. There's a lot of books are just like, because who also has the time to read them? Also other elite people. So a lot of books are just letters from the elite to the elite, especially across time too. I even view myself as belonging to a club of people across the centuries and millennia who stand for truth and want to actually kind of like push the human race on to something greater. And I think the people around me do too. But there's a lot of confusion in the world. There's a lot of these
Do you want to get out and walk?
ghettos and pits you can get stuck in where everyone around you is confused. There's no space to walk, there's no space to think. And you get stuck in these spaces. People get stuck in these spaces, and then they become part of someone else's plan. They end up working their entire life, slaving their entire life, suffering confusedly for they know not what. And
I think that even people,
let's look at these cars get past, and then we can. Hello, Range Rover. Hello, person who owns his own disposal company. It's the people I love around now. It's nice.
But even, think about how much of this is even psychological in the US. Like, if you have access to a car, do you take yourself and drive over to absurdly wealthy neighborhoods to go for walks?
I did, actually, before, when I was living in poor areas.
National parks. Like, do you go to a library? A library itself has millions of dollars worth of books there. Like, it's literally a multi-million-dollar collection of information that you have access to, but I doubt maybe this part of the video, you probably go to libraries, but like...
Yeah, that's true.
Like, not many people do. Not many people take advantage of it. Not many people, like, literally, the parks you have
I'm gonna add
access
this.
to...
I was in Providence. Big city, right next to Boston. Tons of people. I go to the Providence Library. Huge building, like a sacred temple to knowledge, learning, and betterment and the American dream. It's empty. Just empty, like all the time. It was empty. I had my pick of the whole place.
How this? It's
a major city. It's a major capital city. One of the founding cities of this country. I go to the library and it's always empty. You know, the slavery exists in your own mind. It also exists in the fact you have to work so much you don't have the time or energy. And the food you eat prevents your brain from working so you don't have the mental focus. So there is that.
Part of reading books is to expose yourself.
You gotta force yourself.
Part of reading books is to expose yourself to the other lifestyles that are out there, because man is a prisoner of his own mind.
Yes.
Which is a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. So if you don't know that anything better in the world exists, it's hard to dream of anything better, which is why it's so incredible when people make forward progress, because how, like, it's literally like something from God or like the divine.
Really?
It's like, if you don't know any better, how could you intuit that? Like, how do you...
If you believe in evolution, imagine the first man to walk upright. Like, really, like the first dude to walk upright, and everyone, you fucking idiot, walking around at your feet, don't realize that's what hands are for, like a moron. Someone tell him to put his mask on. Oh wait, never mind, crossing over. But really, it's like, imagine you're the first human to walk upright. Imagine like, you're the first
dolphin that said, fuck you, I'm gonna walk on land.
I'm gonna go on land. You're like the first person to like build a 2-story house. Everyone's living in these like mud huts. You're like, I'm gonna take some tree limbs and make a second floor. And people are like, what's floor? And you're like, you're gonna see. And then you do it. And then you're standing on top of your house, you're looking out, and you're like, I can see farther. Let's build Babel. But really, like, yeah, it's crazy. Like, it's really crazy. So this is the craziest thing about the ancient Egyptians. So like the ancient Egyptians didn't have aqueducts, but the Romans did. And the Romans didn't have indoor electricity, but we do. And that's basically all the innovation I've noticed.
It's also the internet, which is pretty big.
The internet's pretty cool too. But like, you think about it though, like the ancient Egyptians went for how long with no running water? Because they started building the society without running water. And then it just never occurred to them to implement running water. But the Romans...
Yeah, but I mean, that's a lot of it. It's like, if you
never occurred to you.
If you were to take a society, like if Boston didn't have, like the tunnels in Boston, the biggest construction project ever, because they weren't built beforehand. If they were built beforehand, it would have been super cheap to make them. But instead, they had to literally dig under all these giant buildings while stopping them from collapsing. And like, it wasn't planned out. So when you don't plan it out and you build a society, it's really difficult to put in the changes. Like the Big Dig, it was literally like $3.2 billion.
It's the largest construction project ever.
I think it might be topped now, but
yeah.
At the time, in what, 2000 something, it was the largest construction project ever at the time it finished.
Yeah, at the time, like, it's the largest construction project in terms of like, I think like metric tons of like material moved of like any human endeavor ever. Pretty massive. Pretty massive.
Seriously, bigger than the Panama, like.
Bigger than the Panama Canal, bigger than like the pyramids of Egypt, the Big Dig in Boston.
And like that, but that's what it takes just to put a highway under Boston. So like, if you don't, you have to build these societies with the technology you have, and it's really difficult to implement new technology into a society that doesn't have it. And we're lucky with the internet that, like,
especially when the new technology threatens the nepotistic structure that it rests on. Because to create the new technology, you need the society. But the new technology could disrupt the society, which is what the internet's doing. The printing press is still doing. Let's be real. The printing press is still doing that. I don't think the global elites have honestly realized the extent of the impact of the printing press. Yeah, like the Medicis. I don't think the Medicis really understand what the printing press has done. Because if they did, I don't know if books would be legal. It's kind of crazy, but I think they should be a mark of their wisdom that they were, but these informations are still dispersing out. We don't have total literacy yet, and even of the people that can read, okay, so it's like basically like everyone can kind of read.
The only reason why the US has freedom of speech is because nepotism wasn't firmly established at the time of its founding.
Yes.
And everyone out there was pioneers who were so fed up with the previous system of nepotism that they put laws in place to stop it. And now, under the guise of like social equality, we're trying to remove that.
Yes.
Sorry, just let your feelings get hurt.
Yeah.
Pause for a second. I don't think you have a weed whacker.
Yeah, the weed whackering. It's all good. They can just observe the weed whackers and see. So that's someone else's company working for someone else's company. It's a beautiful thing. They probably know. So Kershaw Landscape probably knows the people who own that house. Probably also live in the neighborhood. The guy who owns that. Yeah, exactly. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that house. So I'm saying, like, it's just like, whoa. Like some of these are double-decker driveways. You know, or double-decker garage. You can't even see, but like the garage itself is double-decker. They got like an Audi above a Mercedes next to a Porsche over a Lambo. It's just crazy. I think that's why I want to move to this area, so I can sell them stuff and become very healthy.
As a businessman, I like the idea put forward in Buy Back Your Time, where it talks about how by actually buying back your time, you not only help yourself, but also the economy. Because you employ someone else to do a task. Yeah. So you employ someone else to do a task that you don't want to do, which frees up your time and gives someone else money so that they can pay someone to do a task that they don't want to do. And it's not necessarily like...
Well, the alternative is you work yourself to death and die with the money and the government gets it.
Yeah, dude, but some people are weird and they like performing autopsies. Like some people are weird and like cleaning. Like, don't deny someone their weirdness. Like, there are people who are really weird that are like into sewer like treatment and they think it's really cool. Like,
yeah, they're like,
you all know those kids from like elementary school you don't want to talk to. Like they
love playing with dirt and eating worms and stuff. Like, let them do the sewage treatment. Like, don't do your own sewage treatment.
Yeah.
Like, you're robbing them of joy. So yeah, like I don't know, I think that's a good place to end for the video. You think?
Yeah.
Send that.